Hello and welcome to your Steeler Nation podcast, part of the DK Pittsburgh Sports podcast network and sponsored by Total Sports Enterprises. I'm your host, Stryker, and there has been a Stephon Tuitt sighting in Pittsburgh today, ladies and gentlemen. We're super psyched. We heard that Stephon Tuitt was at the Steelers facility. Not sure what was discussed, who he met with, but this is a good first step and really the first thing we've ever heard about Stephon even being around the team since early last season, since before his brother died tragically in that hit and run accident, which I'm sure he's been taking care of his family all year because of that. At least it's a good first sign. I also thought it was a good sign this season because last year at the trade deadline, we tried to pick up Cox, the defensive lineman from the Philadelphia Eagles at the trade deadline. We didn't get him. He was available this offseason, but the Steelers also didn't reach out to get him. They didn't even make an offer to Cox as a free agent. He ended up re-signing with the Eagles again, but to me, I took that as a good sign. If they don't need to go out and get somebody else, maybe they're thinking Tuitt might come back. Let's say that is what we think is actually going to happen, Steeler Nation. Another good sign for the return of Stephon Tuitt and hopefully re-solidifying that entire defensive line with Tyson Alualu also coming back to form the middle of that line. So what's going on right now, Pittsburgh? The Steelers have picked up so many people. I mean, we went out and got Mitch Trubisky, but it looks like the Steelers are doing their due diligence and might just draft a quarterback early this year. They're over there at every single high quarterback pro day this past week. They checked out Kenny Pickett at Pittsburgh. They checked out Ritter at Cincinnati. They checked out Carl over at Mississippi, Willis at Liberty, Howell at UNC, taking them all out to dinner. Could this be the year the Steelers draft their franchise quarterback in the first round? We will have to see, but let's talk about these quarterbacks because the Steelers are taking it seriously, whining and dining these top tier quarterbacks for this draft. To me, I got to think they might be drafting one of these guys. So let's look at them. Let's figure out who we like the best. And let's make a quick rundown. I want to start off first off with Kenny Pickett, since he's right here. He's the hometown guy. He plays in the same stadium at Heinz Field for the Pitt Panthers. Could possibly transfer to still be playing at Heinz Field here for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But let's talk about his metrics here a bit. He looks to be the tallest quarterback out of the five that we're going to be talking about at 6'3", 217 pounds. Second best completion percentage at 67.2. Number one in yards by a mile, 4,300 yards. 42 touchdowns, which also leads these guys, led the NCAA. Only 7 interceptions, highest quarterback rating, 165.3, and a 40 time of a respectable 4.7. Now, he's also pretty athletic. He jumped a 33.5-inch vertical at the combine. We all know he's got great size. He's a good pocket passer, got good pocket mobility, great arm strength. His touch and his accuracy are the only things that is seen as being the slight issues, but he can still move out of the pocket and kill you with his legs as well. 233 yards, 5 touchdowns. So he's not just a stand in the pocket guy as well. Seems to be, like, to me, the most pro-ready quarterback in this draft. Only knock on him, might be the tallest guy in the draft, but it's got the smallest hands by far. Only 8.5 inches, now an eighth of an inch more. So 8 5/8 inches, since he just got him remeasured at his pro day. Keeps stretching him out a little bit more. But they are small in comparison to his size. We'll have to see if that affects him with cold weather games, with the ball being inflated a little bit more in the pros. We'll have to see. Matt Corral is your next guy from Mississippi. Not much shorter, 6'2", 210. He's got the best completion percentage of everybody, all these 5 quarterbacks that we're talking about, 67.9. So only a couple tenths of a percentage above, 0.7% above Kenny Pickett. 3,300 yards he's thrown for, 20 touchdowns and 5 interceptions with a 153.3 rating, though the 5 interceptions is the least amount of interceptions thrown by these quarterbacks. 4.840 with a 29.9 vertical, not super athletic compared to the rest of these guys, but 614 yards and 11 touchdowns on the run. Guy's accurate, he's elusive, and he's got good touch. You know, he seems to me like he could be a complete guy, but still needs some seasoning. But still is mobile. Like, all these quarterbacks appear to be mobile guys, which is what the Steelers wanted to get. They wanted to make sure they got a mobile quarterback, and Matt Corral's another good option here. Next one is the one that everybody seems to be talking about. Malik Willis out of Liberty. Looks to be the most athletic of the bunch. Now, he didn't run the 40. He didn't do a vertical. But I'd have to say that he's probably a 4.4 40 guy from his tape, or even a sub 4.4 guy. He's elusive. 878 rushing yards, 13 touchdowns. I mean, he's an elite runner. Rocket arm. I mean, he was throwing those 60-yard bombs in stride to receivers down the field at his pro day with look like zero effort. His only problem is he can be a little erratic on his timing and his accuracy and his touch. And number wise, he's the shortest quarterback at 6'1.5". 219 is actually the heaviest though of the quarterback. So that helps you out being a little bit more rugged, being a runner. Lowest percentage in completion percentage at 61%. Lowest amount of yardage thrown at 2,800 yards. Still had 27 touchdowns to 12 interceptions, which is the highest amount of interceptions thrown, and the lowest quarterback rating of 151. But by far the fastest and probably most athletically gifted of the quarterbacks. So if that's the direction that Steelers want to go at, like a Lamar Jackson clone, but we know, Lamar Jackson also has his accuracy issues, but he's won an NFL MVP. Is this that same type of guy? Might be that Cordell Stewart type thing, but at least we know we'd play to that quarterback's strength, not force him to be a pocket passer, get him out to the edge or the perimeter, have him make plays on the edge if we're getting pressure, and that is difficult to defend against in the NFL. Next player I want to talk about is Sam Howell, another guy that did not compete in the 40 or in the vertical. Shorter guy too, 6'1", 218. He's middling of all the stats for all the quarterbacks, 62.5% on his completion percentage, 3,000 yards, 24 touchdowns to 9 interceptions, 154 quarterback rating. He's got good vision. He's got good pocket poise and mobility, but he doesn't have the strongest or most accurate arm. He is available to get out of the pocket and make plays with his feet. He had one of the shorter yardages run by one of these 5 quarterbacks at 183 yards, but still managed 11 touchdowns. So the guy is able to make plays when he needs to and make big plays for his offense. Obviously, you don't have to run far sometimes when you're close to the touchdown line, and they can be short touchdowns, but just get it in the end zone any way you can. That's what I want to see out of my quarterbacks. And now here's the last quarterback we're going to talk about, Desmond Ritter from Cincinnati. Another really athletic guy. 6'3", another tall quarterback, as tall as Kenny Pickett, 211, 64.9% completion percentage. That ranks him at third out of these guys. 3,300 yards, ties him with second with Matt Corral. 30 touchdowns puts him in second place. 8 interceptions and 158.7 also puts him in second place behind Pickett. Fastest 40 timed of all these quarterbacks at a 4.5, and he jumped with a 36-inch vert, which is the highest of all these measured quarterbacks. I'd have to assume that Willis would be higher than these. I wouldn't think that Sam would be as high as these guys, but super athletic guy. He's smart and he's a good student of the game. Not the strongest or most accurate arm, but he gets the ball out quickly. He can make plays with his feet. He had 355 yards rushing last year with 6 touchdowns, But what was crazy to me, he's a 4-year starter, and he's been getting better every year. But if you look at his rushing in his first 3 years, he averaged about 600 yards per year and had touchdowns of 5, 5, and 12 in his first 3 years rushing. This guy is a threat on the ground. So obviously he's a 4-year starter. I would like to see him be ranked higher, but he seems to have all the metrics to be a pretty good option at quarterback. And that's the crazy thing, though, is with all 5 of these options, no one in the NFL is saying, this guy is the number 1 pick in the draft, cannot miss prospect. And that's usually what we hear out of at least one quarterback every year. Not this year. Who's going to go first? Can it be Pickett? Could it be Willis? Could it be Corral? We don't know. There's still no consensus on who the top quarterback is. You look at different mock drafts, there's 3 or 4 different guys that would go in the top of this draft, depending on who's picking where and what people want in a quarterback. So I'm glad the Steelers are doing their due diligence. I'm glad they're going out and seeing each one of these quarterbacks in their environment, bringing them in, talking to them to see if any of them can be a potential fit to not necessarily start this year. I fully think that either Trubisky or one of the other quarterbacks that is currently on the roster would start this season. But somebody that can learn the system, hopefully get elevated to eventually start in the system. Would be interesting to see. Would it be in the first round? Would it be in the second round? My personal thinking is they love Malik Willis. I really think they do. I think that if he's on there, if he is available at 20, Steelers getting him. If he's available a little higher, Steelers might jump up to grab him. Maybe give up a pick. That's how high they are on him. Now that I'm looking at these numbers, I mean, I'm harsh on Kenny Pickett's hand size, but his metrics are off the charts. I mean, he's put up sick numbers this season. And the more I'm looking at Desmond Ritter now, too, man, I mean, he looks like he can be a really good option for an athletic quarterback. And Corral, too. I mean, these are some interesting quarterbacks, really interesting quarterbacks. But we'll have to see where the Steelers end up and what they decide to do when it comes to drafting a quarterback, if they draft a quarterback this year in the first round. So the draft is officially listed as April 28th, 29th, and 30th. So now I can officially start setting up my guest stars for the marathon Steeler Nation draft coverage, which will be on all the Steeler Nation networks, Twitter, YouTube. We'll be going live, Facebook probably as well. It's Steeler Nation across the board on all those. And I start a half an hour before the draft. We continue all the way through. Last day of the draft, no commercial breaks. Always have different guests in and out, hopefully different Steelers. Last year we had Highsmith start the draft with us. Dotson was with us when we drafted the guy he blocked for this season, and Najee Harris. He thought that was the coolest thing ever, and I thought it was really cool to get his reaction when we first drafted him as well. So guys, if you don't want to watch me, you want to go to the draft itself, I highly recommend TickPick. There's no service charges for them at all, and the price is set on supply and demand. So I went to go see Ben's last game in Baltimore, and the ticket prices were set at like $500 until I checked out TickPick, and I live in the Baltimore area, so I waited till kickoff. And TickPick makes sure I got my tickets at face value, so I didn't have to be charged an arm and a leg to see Ben's last win in Charm City. So thanks, TickPick. I'll be using you again, obviously, for my next Steelers away game. Highly recommend those guys. And now, guys, it's time for questions from Steeler Nation. So go on over to the Steeler Nation podcast, Steeler Nation website, and click on the football forum. I ask questions every week, and I take my questions directly from the football forum. First question coming over from Lidos. Did I get to see Cooley when I was over in Texas? Cooley being a member over there. I'm sorry, not this time. I wasn't in the Houston area. I was in the Austin area, and then I drove out north when I brought the RV back home through Dallas. So unfortunately, didn't see Cooley, but we are in communication. One of these times, I'd love to swing by and have a drink with him, talk Steelers, and hang out for a bit. Next question from Lidos. What's my opinion on the strong safety situation? I'll tell you the truth. I've been screaming and wanting Honey Badger. I've been calling this since like January, but there's a cheaper option out there now. And I'm starting to lean toward KZ because KZ is still an athletic guy. He's a ball hawk. He can still dislodge the football, hits hard, and not going to be as expensive as Honey Badger. So when I know I've got a guy like Fitzpatrick playing next to him, all I need is another playmaker on that defense to hopefully start making some turnovers and making some big plays. So that's who I'd look for, to tell you the truth. KZ is my next option. And I know they said Neil as well being an option over at SteelerNation.com. Read that article as well. That's pretty cool. Ike Kelly asked the next question. Safe to say all those quarterback needy teams pre-free agency have now changed to only a couple others, Seattle and Detroit primarily. Question is, what position group now falls to top lower third of the draft? Cornerback, offensive tackle, or defensive line? Well, if the quarterbacks, obviously, if they go before us, like 3 of them, I expect really good talent to drop to the Steelers. Like a good corner, possibly an inside linebacker we're drafting, or a defensive lineman. I know we were looking at Davis being an option. Offensive tackle, if a stud offensive tackle drops, you take him. Like that, or Davis, who looks like to be an off-the-chart freak athlete on defensive line. Otherwise, the value there, wide receiver. Steelers might be taking a wide receiver first. That's the talent is there for it. Olave from Ohio State, throw him in the slot. We've got a starter. Bam. Like you got to seriously start thinking about that kind of talent because it's going to be there when the Steelers draft at 20. Next question also from Ike Kelly. Plus, if Jameis Williams is there at 20, do you take him? Now since Kent has 2 choices below us. Yeah. I'm really high on wide receiver. Williams looks to be that high size, speed, quick twitch athlete. I mean, the guy looks sick as well. I think we already have that kind of athlete in Claypool, but you can never have that too many athletes on your team at wide receiver. Not a bad idea. Not a bad idea. I would like that. I definitely would like that too, Litos. Blitz asking the next questions. After the free agency signing, who is your top pick in the draft? I'd have to say wide receiver or strong safety because there's still the needs that have not been addressed. Depending on if we pick up Matthews, strong safety might come off my board. Next question, what position would you want to add still in free agency? Obviously, strong safety and wide receiver. We still need a slot receiver. We need another 4th receiver who can stretch the field. Could pick up that guy in the draft easily. Strong safety, I don't know if we're going to be getting an instant playmaker yet. We'll have to see who's available, but I don't think drafting 20 in the first round, we're going to see that type of guy. Last question from Blitz. Does Derek Watt make the team? Top 10 in 2022 cap number for a barely used fullback, but great special teamer and brother of an all-time great Steeler. You hit the nail kind of on the head there, Blitz. It's like, do you fire TJ's brother and expect him to be happy about it? Now, here's the only way I would consider firing DJ Watt. And that is if we draft the brother of Cameron Hayward. Evidently, Hayward's brother is also a fullback. He's hella athletic. Steelers love him. They've checked him out. They've talked to him. Of course, they know about him because, Cam's going to tell him about it, sing his praises all the time, too. So, yeah, I can see it. I could see that being the only way to supplement and get rid of Derek Watt would be if the Steelers draft Cam Hayward's brother to play fullback. That's the only way. Steelers asks a question. Should the Steelers draft quarterback in round 1 or wait and see if a good one falls to 2 or just wait until 2023 if required? I think all of the above, Steelers ask, really. I think if Malik Willis is there in the first, they take him. Pickett's there, they might take him in the first 2. But if Ritter's there in the second, that might be like the best of all worlds, to tell you the truth. Especially if we get a good playmaker in the first or a super athletic lineman in the first. Be all for that. I'd be all for it. I hear that the draft class is much better for quarterbacks next year. Could be. This being a light year would actually tell you that next year should be a better year. So, but they're at least also doing their due diligence, like I just talked about in this podcast. They've interviewed everybody. So they're going to know how much they like these quarterbacks and which ones they would actually consider drafting when they hit the draft room for this draft. Last questions from Drink Iron City, as always. Davis, Olave, Pickett, all there at 120. Who do you take? My choice is Davis from Drink Iron City. I have to agree with you. For those three, if it's Pickett, Davis, or Olave, I'd love to have any of them, to tell you the truth, but I think Davis is just a monster. It's like you cannot pass on a physical freak. That's what drove a wedge between Cowher and Donahoe. When we passed on Javon Curse, we ended up drafting Troy Edwards. And that was it. That was it. I mean, hella good quarterback in college, but man, that freak athlete might have cost us some Super Bowls. And that's what you take. I'm with you there. I definitely go for Davis. Number 2, the amount of money spent on Hill for wide receivers services may impact Deontay Johnson to an extent. I think Hill's contract was a fluke sort of deal, but will impact Johnson to about $2 million. I think we ink him in the 14 to 16 million range. What's your opinion on Hill's impact of DJ's contract? Now, I think you're right there. Like DJ already said and tweeted out like 16 mil. He said that a while ago. And back when he tweeted it, I'm like, 16 mil is a steal for this guy. He's already projected to be a great player. And I've already gone through the metrics of the X receivers. He's the first X receiver ever to make a Pro Bowl in his first 3 years as a receiver. All of our X receivers blow up in their 4th year. You ink him. You sign this guy to his contract and you lock him in. 16 mil will be a steal because we see what these numbers are starting to approach. 20 million, 25 million, approaching 30 on some of these wide receiver contracts. You lock him down for 5 years at 16 mil, that's a steal. Absolute steal. Question number 3, does Mitch start? I'd lean toward yes, obviously, because we're paying him the most money out of everybody. He's got the most starting experience between Haskins and Rudolph, actually more than them combined, to tell you the truth. But I want to see what Haskins can do also as a player with a year of Steelers offense under his belt. I think that Rudolph is now going to be odd man out. I think he's going to get a little discouraged. I think he's going to get a little upset about his situation in Pittsburgh because Pittsburgh seems to like already has fallen in love with Mitch and his wife and welcomed him. And nobody has welcomed or loved Rudolph yet. Nobody. Like some people get excited about Haskins, but Rudolph's like everybody's punching bag for some reason. I want to see if he can still do something, but we'll have to see. But yeah, Mitch should be the starter. Last question. It's going to be a very dry year here where I live. Last year was very dry as well. I burned 128 gallons of gasoline in my small engine equipment, mostly pumping water. What is the over-under for this year's usage? Well, just going by complete metrics, climate change, making things warm up a little, I'd say the over-under for this year would probably be 135 gallons, man. And that's not cheap with the price of gas going up, bro. So wait for that price of gas to drop. Stash it in a tank, man, and have a good one. Thanks, Stryker, for all these. Are splendid. You are welcome, Drink Iron City. I appreciate all your questions and everybody from Steeler Nation chiming in. Going over, check out our sponsor, Total Sports Enterprises at tseshop.com. We just gave away a Pat Freiermuth signed jersey this week. Make sure you follow them on Twitter, Total Sports Enterprises. Make sure you lock them in because you got a chance to win signed merchandise every week. Thank you so much to Total Sports Enterprises for all this great stuff. Check out our vidcast. We should be on Tuesday at 7 p.m. this week. Check out great Pittsburgh sports content at dkpittsburghsports.com. Read our great Steeler-focused articles over at SteelerNation.com. Tweet us at SteelerNation. Instagram us at SteelerNation.com. Follow the podcast at Twitter at _SN Podcast or Instagram, Steeler Nation Podcast. And follow me, Stryker, on Twitter and Instagram at SN Stryker. Thanks for joining us for the Steeler Nation podcast, sponsored by Total Sports Enterprises, part of the DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. I'm your host, G. Stryker, rooting along with you as always. Go Steelers!